नमस्ते, स्वागत है आपका इंडिया दिस वीक के नए एपिसोड में और मैं हूं आपकी होस्ट आमना अंसारी।
Hi, this is Khalid Beg, and welcome to yet another episode of India This Week. Today, please welcome our new panelist, Pankaj Sapkal from Pune. And a little background on Pankaj. Pankaj is an alumni of IIT Bombay, student of design, and he works basically in the realm of design where you innovate a lot. And basically, it has a lot to do, a lot of us don't know about it, but it has a lot to do with human psychology because you dive into products, ideas, and to see how, humans respond to that. And hence someone like him who's on the top of the game in the world of design has a lot of interest in collective and individual psychology, and has also been a team member of a very popular game which basically works on nurturing human empathy through very scientific temperament. Also, he keeps a huge interest in history. He's a big history buff, and also he's a very good theater artist who I know personally of. Welcome, Pankaj.
Thank you, Khalid. Nice to see you, and Amana.
स्वागत है
Thanks
पंकज जी
see
आपका।
you, Pankaj.
Thank you, Amana.
Right. So, as you could have seen from the title of the show, we've gone a little different today. And over these years, we've had so many interesting discussions with Pankaj. And we thought, Amna and me, we've had them in person, but we would want that wisdom, we would want those insights, that different way of looking at life to the entire world and to our YouTube family as well. So, as the title goes, understanding the human mind. Right. So, we'll straight away dive into it. Pankaj, our first question to you is that let's take any 25-year-old in the world, male, female, any nationality, ethnicity. At this age, at 25, what is it that, your mind, your convictions, mind is everything. It stores in everything. You see the world through it, right? So your convictions, your biases, your complexes, your insecurities, your fears, your strengths, how all that shaped up at the age of 25? And can they really change after the age of 25?
It's a nice question, Khalid. In my opinion, I think why 25? I mean, we are what we are at any age, and most of what we are, I think, in my opinion, is all formed right from childhood. So basically, one can say that there's a core identity which forms right in childhood, and that can get modified at a surface level or even radically in some ways, but overall, the core identity always remains same. So it's very difficult to do anything about the core identity unless there's a some kind of a crisis or some major existential problems, issues that happens which challenge the whole identity. Apart from that, those things, I think we remain pretty much the same across. The way we come across at the surface level can change, but at the core we always remain the same, in my opinion. And इसके कई कारण हैं. कारण ये है कि changing as a human being, we can change what we are aware of. We are actually not very aware of what exactly our core identity is. For example, I might have a particular attitude towards something. My attitude might be of something that I consider as a very confident attitude, and actually it might be veering on, let's say, aggressiveness, and I may not even be aware of that. To be aware of that, of what one's core identity is, that takes a little bit of metacognitive thinking, as they call it, and that is not very easily accessible to everyone. And of course, to get into that zone, we have to have the correct opportunities, the correct exposure, etc., etc. And even then, we can only change to a certain extent. I would say, to answer your question very, very clearly, maybe we can change about 2 to 3% of what we are, and the core always remains the same. So, yes, that's it. And that reminds me of a famous dialogue from Sholay. कि अरे तुम कभी नहीं सुधरोगे, जब हम नहीं सुधरे तो तुम क्या सुधरोगे. That's all.
So पंकज, हम ये कह सकते हैं कि हम सब अपने चाइल्डहुड का प्रोडक्ट होते हैं.
चाइल्डहुड का प्रोडक्ट बिल्कुल होते हैं. हमारी कोर आइडेंटिटी चाइल्डहुड में बनती है. Lots of times what happens is that we come up with a certain identity. All of us are born in some kind of a protective environment. Family में पैदा होते हैं. our early role models are typically our parents or some relatives or our siblings. So we grow up in a sort of a bubble, and that's where our core identity forms. And then as we go out into the world, our identity kind of crashes into the rest of the world. And that is the time we start noticing the conflicts, the how our upbringing does not match what the world is exactly, and how we adapt at a surface level to match with the world. That is the whole name of the game, in fact. So core identity बचपन में develop हो जाती है, attitudes हो जाते हैं, and बाकी सब थोड़ा बहुत modify हो जाता है, and it is that modification which we think कि हाँ मैंने बहुत change कर लिया. For example, अगर आप देखो तो some people might start stuttering at early age, and that's a very obvious problem. कि हमको पता है कि मैं stutter कर रहा हूँ, तो उसके लिए आदमी कुछ कर सकता है, उसको completely change कर सकता है. There are very famous examples of people who used to stutter when they were kids, and बड़े होके they overcome that problem very, very effectively. They become great orators. So in this manner, the way that we interface with the world, that we can alter. But हमारे जो internal attitudes है, the more closer they are to our core identity, the more difficult it is to understand what it is. जो aware ही नहीं होते हैं कि हम क्या है, तो उसको क्या change करेंगे? So that becomes the core of the problem actually.
सो अगर हम ये चीज़ अभी जैसे आपने बोला कि हमारा चाइल्डहुड बहुत बड़ा रीज़न होता है कि हम क्या अभी प्रोडक्ट हैं, तो इसमें एक आप अगर इसको दूसरी तरह से अगर देखें तो एक ये भी रिस्क है कि हम अपने फ्लॉज को जस्टिफाई कर सकते हैं कई बार, तो उसे कैसे आप डिफाइन करेंगे? देन एवरीबडी कैन जस्ट से कि मेरी तो कोई गलती है नहीं, ये मेरा बचपने का मैं प्रोडक्ट ही ऐसा हूँ.
हाँ, तो बचपन की तरफ पॉइंट करे या ना करे, हम अपने आप को जस्टिफाई तो करते ही है. तो हर कोई करता है मेरे ख्याल से. बहुत कम लोग होते हैं जो किसी तौर पे बोलते हैं कि हाँ मैं गलत हूँ, मेरी एटीट्यूड गलत है. और वो भी जो लोग एडमिट करते हैं वो बहुत स्मॉल लेवल पे होता है एडमिट. और कुछ लोग तो एडमिट इसलिए करते हैं ताकि वो ओपन माइंडेड दिखें. बाकी तो ये होता है कि अगर मेरी एटीट्यूड है, सपोज लेट्स से टू गिव एन एग्जांपल, इफ आई एम बोर्न इन अ वेरी violent part of the town, let's say I've been born in a ghetto, and where if somebody disses me, my instinctive reaction is to pull out a knife and attack them or to get into a fight. How am I going to alter that? So as I grow up, let's say I go out of that particular ghetto, even then I might still think that being aggressive is the answer to everything, because that is what I have been taught. I may not point at it as my childhood upbringing, because I might think that is how a person is supposed to behave. कि मेरी इज्जत की बात है, किसी ने मुझे रास्ते में धक्का मारा तो मेरा ये हक बनता है कि मैं उसकी गिरबान पकड़ूं और उसको 2 थप्पड़ उल्टे लगा दूं. तो ये तो होता है. तो माइनर चेंजेस होते हैं, और बचपन से जो कंडीशनिंग्स होती है उसी को हम फॉलो करते हैं, भले ही हमें पता हो या ना हो कि ये बचपन के अपब्रिंगिंग के कारण है, लेकिन हम फॉलो तो करते हैं. और अगर ज्यादा अवेयर है और किसी के सामने अगर हमको अपने आप की अपना जस्टिफिकेशन देना है, तो हम इंटेलेक्चुअल जस्टिफिकेशन ढूंढते हैं कि इसके लिए होता है. लेकिन फैक्ट ऑफ द मैटर इज कि इट इज आवर अपब्रिंगिंग, हार्डली एनीथिंग मोर देन दैट.
सो बेसिकली एक चीज़ और मुझे आप पंकज क्लियर कीजिए कि जब आप अपब्रिंगिंग की बात करते हैं तो आप यहाँ पे बात कर रहे हैं हमारे इन्वायरमेंट की, सर्कमस्टांसेस की, या इसमें जेनेटिक्स भी एक बहुत बड़ा पार्ट प्ले करता है?
जेनेटिक्स की तरफ हम उंगली दिखाते तो हैं, लेकिन जेनेटिक डिटर्मिनिज्म जिसको बोलते हैं, कि जो जीन्स में है वो आप डिफाइन हो चुके हैं. ये अभी साइंटिफिकली डिस्प्रूव हो चुका है कि जेनेटिक डिटर्मिनिज्म होता है. कोई जीन को किक इन करने के लिए, भले वो फिजिकल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक भी डिटरमिन करे, उसके लिए बाकी जीन्स के भी रोल होते हैं. और उसके लिए कौन से एनवायरमेंटल फैक्टर्स होते हैं जो उसके जीन को एक्टिवेट करते हैं, उसके ऊपर हमारी कंप्लीट साइंटिफिक ग्रास्प नहीं है अभी तक. सो जेनेटिक्स प्ले करता है कि नहीं है, शायद करता भी होगा एक लिमिटेड हद तक, बट इन माय ओपिनियन ज्यादा इफेक्ट होता है कि हमारे नर्चर का, कि हमें किस तरह से अपब्रिंगिंग दी गई है. हम ओपन माइंडेड सोसाइटी में है तो शायद हम थोड़े बहुत ज्यादा ओपन होंगे, और बस इतना ही है कि इन्फ्लुएंसेस है, अभी वो जेनेटिक ही है या हमारे माँ बाप से सीखे हैं या हमारे नेबर्स के बच्चे से सीखे हैं, हमको नहीं पता होता, लेकिन जो भी
राइट।
होता है वो बाहर का ही इन्फ्लुएंस होता है।
ओके। सो किस तरह से हम फिर ओवरकम कर सकते हैं अपने फ्लॉज को, अगर ये सब इन्वायरमेंट के ऊपर बेस्ड है तो? और हमें, अगर हमें लगता है कि ये हमारा जो कोर नेचर है इसमें कुछ प्रॉब्लम है, तो क्या हमें उसे फाइट करना चाहिए, या फिर बेटर तरीका ये होगा कि हम उसे एक्नॉलेज करें और उसी के अराउंड वर्क करें? किस तरह से हम इसको टैकल करना चाहिए हमें?
सो मेरा ये मानना है कि जो हम है, जो हमें फीलिंग्स आती है, वो हम डिफाइन हो चुके हैं चाइल्डहुड में, उस पर मॉडिफिकेशन बहुत ज्यादा नहीं हो सकती है, और मॉडिफिकेशन हो भी गई तो भी अंदर से हमें जो फीलिंग आती है वो आती ही है। जो मैंने एग्जांपल दिया कि अगर मैं रास्ते से जा रहा हूँ, मुझे किसी का धक्का लग गया, तो मैं कैसे रिएक्ट करूंगा? तो अगर मेरे अंदर से इमीडिएटली एंगर निकलता है तो शायद हमेशा निकलेगा, क्योंकि मैं ट्रिगर हो चुका हूँ। तो ये ट्रिगर होने के बाद मैं उसके साथ कैसे डील करता हूँ, ये मेरी अपनी पर्सपेक्टिव है। अंग्रेजी में एक कहावत है, बहुत फेमस फ्रेज है कि बिटवीन स्टिमुलस एंड रिस्पॉन्स देयर लाइज अ स्पेस, एंड इन दैट स्पेस लाइज योर फ्रीडम। यानी हमें जो स्टिमुलस मिलता है उससे हम ट्रिगर होते हैं, वो ट्रिगर होने के बाद हम इमीडिएटली रिएक्ट करते हैं। तो यही जो बताते हैं कि थोड़ा संयम रखिए, इमीडिएटली रिएक्ट मत कीजिए, थोड़ा टाइम जाने दीजिए। तो वो जो स्पेस मिलती है, शायद उससे हमें थोड़ा मालूम पड़ता है कि हमारे अंदर कौन सी भावनाएं जाग रही है, और फिर उसके साथ आप चेंज कर सकते हो कि नहीं कर सकते हो, ये दूसरी बात है। तो मेरा ये मानना है कि अपने आप को पहले तो एक्सेप्ट करना चाहिए, क्योंकि सबसे बड़ी लाइफ की एम्पावरमेंट यही होती है कि हम अपने आप के साथ कंफर्टेबल रहे। उससे बड़ी कोई एम्पावरमेंट नहीं है। और अगर हम अपने आप के साथ कंफर्टेबल रहे, इसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि हमारे में जो बुरी चीजें हैं, जो बुरे रिएक्शंस आते हैं, वो हम सारे फॉलो करें। नहीं, ये हमको मालूम होना चाहिए कि ये रिएक्शन है, मेरे अंदर कहीं से आया है, उस पर रिएक्ट करना मुझे जरूरी नहीं है, उससे भागना भी जरूरी नहीं है, उसको अडॉप्ट करना भी जरूरी नहीं है। बस जो आता है वो आने दीजिए, उसको देखिए, उसका इफेक्ट क्या होता है, और शायद आप बदल जाओगे उससे। अवेयरनेस इज इम्पोर्टेंट। I
So
hope that answers
Pankaj,
your question.
you've spoken a lot about, ultimately what I understand from your talks is that we are what our childhood is, that everybody's personality can be traced to everything that he or she has seen in childhood. So on this topic, wanting to take this ahead, want to understand from you, Pankaj, is that we see that a lot of children who get abused in their childhood, right? Surprisingly, some of them continue that abuse. If someone's got abused as a child, he then, when he becomes an adult, abuses another child. Of course, there are people who get abused and then they lead the crusade against abuse, right?
Correct.
So that would be my first question. But a follow-up to that also would be, Pankaj, that is there a correlation between ideologies like communism, which are about destruction, and about children who had bad childhoods, wherein they are always rebelling against that authority, that power authority, who they see in that father or mother figure, whose love they did not get, and hence this constant rebellion for the sake of rebellion, whether that's not required as well, and this constant thing of finding necessary. So if you could answer both of these for me.
Sure, sure. So number one, of course, अगर मैं बहुत एंटी ऑथोरिटेरियन हूँ, एंटी एस्टैब्लिशमेंट हूँ, तो शायद कहीं से मेरे अपब्रिंगिंग में ही आया है कि maybe I have seen my uncle or my father or my mother always, oppose something. Okay, so I adopt that behavior, and later on, as I grow up, I start justifying that. So that is one aspect of it. The second aspect of what you're talking about, how do people turn to a certain ideology? And you have taken the example of communism. I would say communism is not the only one, any ideology. इसका एक कारण ये है, इसके लिए सोसाइटी में अगर हम डीपली देखें, so any individual has two parents, and we'll imagine a normal family when there's a father and a mother. So typically, if the father and mother get along very well, then there's a different kind of upbringing. If the father and mother are continuously opposed to each other, then there's a different kind of upbringing. Now you bring an aspect of, let's say, community influences. Imagine that the father is from one community, the mother is from another community, or the father is of one ideology, mother is of another ideology. Okay, so this means there's a kind of a split parenting over here, and that does not get along with each other. So the child naturally learns to either adopt one of the dominant one and reject the other one, or the child may also say, I will reject both of them. And then when there's a split identity and the child's identity in itself has not been completely formed in this direction or that direction, and if the child feels confused about it, the child is game for any other ideology which comes along. So typically, like you, I think, indicated that in a broken marriage, and that is going to happen, we can't do anything about it, because the way society is going, we are going to see more and more split marriages. I remember when, 30, 40 years back, there weren't so many divorces in society. Now the rate of divorce has gone sky high. So what happens in a situation like that? And this is a reality which we have to prepare for. A child will be coming, more and more children will be born in broken families. Maybe it's not a good idea to call it a broken family. It's just, parents have split. Now, after the parents split, what identity does the child carry? Does he go to the identity of the father, or does he go to the identity of the mother, or does he look for some other identity to form his own new identity? If the child has good circumstances, तो उसकी identity अच्छे से बनेगी. If the child is simply looking for an identity, then any ideology which comes along and which he finds that, oh, this ideology is good, and typically a lot of ideologies do have a veneer ki hum bahut achhe hai, we are very progressive, we are very liberal, we are like this, and the child can gravitate towards that. And ideologies will often hide their histories. कि इतने मिलियंस का जीनोसाइड किया है, ये बाजू में रखते हैं, और हमने जो अच्छा किया है वो दिखाते हैं typically. So it is going to be assured that the child will gravitate to whatever attraction comes, whatever ideology or philosophy or culture allows the child to feel good about himself or herself. The child will gravitate towards that. The key is, are you getting a sense of community? Are you getting a sense of belonging? And a lot of new ideologies do give you that. For example, if there's a political ideology which offers you a sense of belonging, and the child has never felt like he belonged in a home because maa baap jagad rahe hai, they don't talk to each other, let's say, or they have split and the child really doesn't feel he belongs anywhere, obviously the child is going to want a sense of belonging, and a group which comes along and treats him ki are aaj aap se tu hamara hai, the child will obviously gravitate towards that. And there's the philosophy behind it becomes secondary actually, while the child thinks it's a philosophy, but behind it there are very basic things ki sense of community de rahe usko sense of belonging de rahe hain, usko ek noble purpose ke jaisa bata rahe hain ki now that you're part of us, we are going to change the world, we are going to do great things. And the child is not always in a position to understand ki bhaiya iske piche this particular culture that I'm entering or this particular ideology that I'm entering, iske bhi flip side hai.
Right.
Because ultimately हम सबको क्या होता है, थोड़ा प्यार चाहिए होती है, दोस्त चाहिए होते हैं अच्छे जो आपको खुलेआम से वेलकम करे, and that's where you'll gravitate.
Right. Pankaj, I think first question you did not answer because you gave such a brilliant answer that why do some children who have been abused turn themselves also into abusers? That psychology, if you could tell us.
You're right. इसके ऊपर environmental, again the whole thing comes ki, has the child who has been abused, did the child get proper guidance after that? How to handle it? Okay, trauma hua hai. Okay, the child has a lot of trauma. Does the child also have some positive influences in his or her life which tells the child how to handle this trauma? If so, then the child can go in a positive direction. Otherwise, the child will gravitate in that direction. इस बात पे अगर आप मुझे allow करें, so we say that empathy is a very beautiful thing, and indeed it is a beautiful thing. But understand that empathy can also have its negative sides. Okay. For example, if the child who has been brought up in a very emotionless kind of a scenario, and the only time he feels connected to a human being is when he sees the other human being's reactions in a situation of pain and abuse, the child is going to want that kind of thing. Okay, so there's a pathway that can take you into a psychopathic direction also. You can become a psychopath where the only time that you feel emotions is by either hurting yourself or by hurting someone else. And the child doesn't know any better and grows into that and becomes a full psychopath. Like in North India, from that village, there was that 8-year-old kid, I forget his name, who killed some young babies. कि पत्थर से मार के उनको मार दिया, and 3 murders he did, and he was very blasé about it. जब पुलिस उसको पकड़ लिया after the 3rd murder, I think, and he said it felt nice. He was smiling and laughing and saying मुझे बिस्किट दो खाने को and that kind of stuff. तो ये हुआ कैसे कि उसके पहले के 2 murders सोसाइटी ने छिपाए भी. Okay, that is more interesting in my opinion. कि the people around that child conspired to hide it, and he went on to do the 3rd murder also. So it is the circumstance around the child which also encourages. And sometimes psychopathy can begin even as an embryo, because the child, when the child is in the womb, the child is very sensitive to the mother's emotional reactions. So if the child feels a deadening of emotions over there, the child may adopt that. And only when there's excessive pain or something, that emotional reaction comes. So the child, the basic emotional framework of the child begins to form right when the child is in the womb. A lot of research behind it. So yes, that is, and I would say it is the responsibility of society. कि वो बच्चा तो है, उसको जो सर्कमस्टेंस है उसमें वो डील कर रहा है, उसको लगता है कि मुझे लोगों को मारना चाहिए, and that's what makes me feel nice, then in a way it is the responsibility of society to ensure कि बच्चों की परवरिश अच्छी हो, positive values society में हो. There are always somebody who watch out for the underprivileged, for people who are victims of abuse. They don't have to be necessarily underprivileged. Plenty of examples of very privileged people also becoming psychopaths. But at some points, society needs to give attention to children more. Because I would say, आज की तारीख में दुनिया में जितने सारे problems है, I know you do a lot of political discussions, etc. on your channel. And in my opinion, tackling problems of grown-ups is a very difficult thing. The best bet of society is कि बच्चों पे ध्यान दो, कि उनको जो अच्छी परवरिश होनी चाहिए. There have to be systematic programs for that. You have to ensure that they grow up in a positive and constructive environment. And that is the only way. एक बार वो बच्चा उस लाइन पे चला गया of psychopathy or antisocial behavior and all, उसके बाद rectify करना बहुत मुश्किल होता है. So that is what it would be about.
Thank you, Pankaj.
It was brilliant, Pankaj. I think I have learned a lot right now.
Of course,
Okay.
I'm not a professional psychologist, so what I say is not qualified from a medical perspective, so do not attempt anything at home. And
Sure.
Don't try these stunts at home.
ओके
Yes.
तो जो मेरा नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन है वो मैं बात करना चाहती हूँ मोरालिटी के ऊपर. लाइक वी कीप हियरिंग दिस आर्ग्यूमेंट कि मोरल अथॉरिटी है, मोरालिटी है, बट हम ये भी जानते हैं कि मोरालिटी बहुत सब्जेक्टिव होता है. एंड ऑल्सो हम किस तरह से जस्टिफाई और डिफाइन कर सकते हैं मोरालिटी को, जो बेसिकली उसकी डेफिनेशन आती ही एक ऐसे माइंड से है जो बहुत सेल्फिश ह्यूमन बीइंग है. सो आप कैसे देखते हैं इस मोरालिटी के पूरे आर्ग्यूमेंट को?
I would say कि जिसे हम अच्छी morality समझते हैं, that is simply long visioned or far visioned selfishness. Okay.
Okay, interesting.
कि फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर मैं सिर्फ अपने लिए सोचूंगा तो दैट इज शॉर्ट साइटेड मोरालिटी. ओके. बट मैं अपने नेबर्स के लिए सोचूंगा, मैं अपने देश के लिए सोचूंगा, मैं अपने कौम के लिए सोचूंगा, सो दैट इज अ बिट ऑफ अ फार साइटेड सेल्फिशनेस, इजंट इट? कि मेरे आजू बाजू के लोग खुश होंगे तो मैं भी खुश रहूंगा, मेरे दोस्त लोग खुश होंगे तो मैं भी खुश रहूंगा. तो ये भी सेल्फिशनेस ही है इन सम वे, राइट? सो in a way, I'll give you a very interesting angle on this. What happens is, बच्चों को तो पता नहीं होता है शॉर्ट साइटेड क्या है, फार साइटेड क्या है. अगर बच्चों को एक ग्रुप में डाल दो, they will be very happily take somebody else's toy. They will very happily smack another child on the head. And if nobody stops them, they can go on to do very bad stuff, but they might still protect themselves. So उसकी जो morality है वो short sighted है, because वो अपने बारे में सोच रहा है सिर्फ. So because the child does not have the vision to understand the repercussions of his what he is doing. Okay. और अगर आप देखेंगे तो all religions, all ideologies, all governments, all laws, what are they doing? They are trying to tell us, boss, तुम जो करते हो उसका consequence होता है. Whatever actions you do, there's a consequence to that, and that is going to affect you. कि अगर मैं किसी को मारूं तो कानून मुझे पकड़ के ले जाएगा. बच्चों को भी ये सिखाना पड़ता है कि अगर तुम ये करोगे तो समथिंग बैड विल हैपन, पापा विल पनिश यू. थोड़े बड़े होते हैं तो बोलते हैं कि भैया कोई गॉड है या कोई है, वो आपको आके पनिश करेगा. सो अल्टीमेटली व्हाट सोसाइटी इज डूइंग is it is because the child can't see far sightedly, society is telling the child ki if you do this then this is the repercussion. So the job of society is to bring that far sightedness in front of the person or the child or the grown up and say कि आपके एक्शन का कॉन्सिक्वेंस होगा, अगर आप पकड़े जाओगे तो आपको पनिशमेंट मिलेगी. सो अल्टीमेटली मोरालिटी और लॉज आर बेस्ड ऑन दिस ओनली, कि आपके एक्शन का कॉन्सिक्वेंस क्या है, आपको झेलना पड़ेगा. वी विल पुट पुलिस ऑन यू, वी विल एंश्योर. और पुलिस नहीं है तो बोले फिर खुदा से डरो, क्योंकि अल्टीमेटली देन गॉड इज लुकिंग एट यू. सो इन व्हाटएवर वे द एफर्ट ऑफ सोसाइटी is to ensure that the child understands that there is always a consequence of your actions and you have to pay for what you did. So that is the basic framework of morality, I think.
Again, very interesting, Pankaj. Pankaj, I wanted to touch back on something which has always been a little exciting for people, even though in real life it's not, and you've touched upon it. But if you could just tell us about some famous serial killers and how much of a serial killer is he? Are serial killers just born, or they become like that due to the environment and the societal triggers and the way they grow up and all? And if you could just tell us some stories of some famous serial killers, a pattern which could be seen amongst them.
Very interesting question, and about serial killers especially. It used to be one of my favorite topics because psychopathy जो होती है वो develop कैसे होती है, that is a very interesting phenomena. And of course we can say कि बचपन में बच्चों को empathy नहीं मिला, nobody hugged that child very properly, तो psycho हो गया थोड़ा. That is one of the commonest jokes कि you didn't get hugged properly when you were a child. उसके पीछे ये भी है कि traumatizing events होते हैं, उससे वो child ने ऐसे इस तरह से react किया, and then the child found a certain success in dealing with it in that way, and then the child continued in that direction. Correct? So psychopathy can happen like that, and there are famous serial killers, plenty of them are there. My favorite example, which I always like to give, is, let's say, Dexter. Right. And if you actually look at this with a little bit empathy, suppose you and I or any of us are born in a situation where we face tremendous abuse as a child, right? As a child, कि हमारे emotions को बहुत जबरदस्त रौन दिया गया. Okay, how will we come out of it? Because it's extremely difficult. लोगों को basic, even when you're grown up और आपके ऊपर कोई अत्याचार करता है किसी भी प्रकार का, सालों साल तक कई लोगों को मरने तक उसका resolution नहीं मिलता. So it is very difficult to get out of it. But in my opinion, there is always a way to somehow turn that particular attitude into something positive. Like I said, I gave the example of Dexter. Dexter is a very interesting series in which there's this the serial killer who was affected as a child, and he becomes a serial killer eventually, but he has a role model in his life, and that role model teaches him how to commit a murder very properly, and he lays down rules for him. You can only kill bad people. Okay, you have to first ascertain that the person is actually a bad person, and then you may kill that person, taking care that you're not getting caught. So while this is an extreme example, it is also about the power of accepting oneself, and आपकी जो भी tendency है, you could turn it into something positive. It is always possible in this way or that way. As a metaphor, in Buddhism, Lord Buddha is always holding a lotus. Now, why is he holding a lotus? Because the lotus has a very interesting name, which is interestingly Pankaj. What it means is Pank plus Ja. Pank in English and Latin, it also means dirt. Ja means Genesis, उससे वो word है जन, कि जन्म जिससे आता है. So that flower, which is born of mud, is the definition of the lotus. So why is the Buddha holding a lotus? The Buddha holds a lotus to show that even in the midst of dirt, beauty can be born. So even if, let's say, one is born in extremely adverse situations, the possibility of one turning out to be a beautiful human being will always be there. The point is, how do we go in that direction? So possibility hai. अच्छे बनने की भी possibility है, बुरे बनने की भी possibility है, and society की responsibility ये है कि regardless of who's affected or badly किसी के ऊपर हो जाता है कुछ due to circumstance, how to give them support, how to help them go to a positive place, and without running away from what one is. Can we use that, whatever our emotions are, our pains are, can we turn them into something positive? That is, I think, the entire message of Lord Buddha holding the lotus flower.
पंकज, मेरा जो अगला सवाल है वो रिलेशनशिप्स को लेकर है। ऐसा कहा जाता है कि हमारे बचपने में ही ये चीज़ डिसाइड हो जाती है, डिटरमाइन हो जाती है कि किस तरह का पार्टनर हम अट्रैक्ट करेंगे और पसंद करेंगे, और इसीलिए कहा जाता है कि कुछ लोग बार बार टॉक्सिक पर्सन के साथ ही रिलेशनशिप में जाते हैं, एक पैटर्न बन जाता है। तो आप इसे कैसे डिफाइन करेंगे, इसमें कितनी सच्चाई है, और प्लीज ये एडवाइस दीजिए, आई थिंक बहुत लोग ये जानना चाहते हैं कि इसे ओवरकम कैसे करें।
हाँ, अभी रिलेशनशिप के बारे में किसी ने, जे कृष्णमूर्ति ने ये कहा है कि रिलेशनशिप इज द मिरर ऑफ द सोल. सो ये बात सही है कि हम जो है वो रिलेशनशिप में रिफ्लेक्ट करता है, not only in the way how we relate to people, but also in how we are open to the kind of people that we hang out with. Okay. So for example, अगर मैंने बचपन में अगर ये देखा है कि मेरे पेरेंट्स की रिलेशनशिप नोक झोंक की है, झगड़ा करते रहते हैं, so I may be open to that kind of relationship. Now it is very natural. So I will be perfectly okay if somebody talks to me disrespectfully. I may not even pick up the signal कि disrespectfully कर रहा है, because that is what I have been used to from childhood. So a lot of times, if you have grown up with the wrong kind of role models, माँ बाप के समझिए या formative जो influences होते हैं उनके role models अगर इस type के हो, तो we learn to be okay with people giving us the same treatment. If one of our parents has been treating the other parent in a very bad way and attacking the person's self-esteem, and so we sometimes become okay with that kind of behavior being given to us, or we learn to give that particular behavior to others. So ये बहुत natural है, and इसको अभी tackle कैसे करें ये बहुत मुश्किल बात है, because there's no set answer for no generic answer to it. It will have to be an individual thing. इसके लिए काफी काउंसलर्स होते हैं जो आपके पैटर्न्स आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं कि आप किस तरह से रिलेट करते हो, आप किस तरह से रिएक्ट करते हो, या किस तरह की ट्रीटमेंट अलाउ करते हो अपने साथ, तो ये पैटर्न आइडेंटिफाई करना होता है, एंड इट इज इजियर सेड देन डन हाउ टू आइडेंटिफाई इट, बिकॉज दैट्स अ वेरी डिफिकल्ट थिंग, क्योंकि वो साइकोलॉजिस्ट हमारे रिलेशनशिप के अंदर आकर तो नहीं देख सकता. दैट इज वन ऑफ द बिगेस्ट Achilles heel of psychology, that they are dependent on what we tell them. They cannot actually come and watch what we are doing. They do not come and check how we let others treat us. So what we tell them is what they have to accept. And even if they tell us the correct things, we may not necessarily be open to adopting those things. Correct? So this is a difficult question. I don't think there's any set answer to it, but individually, if one identifies कि मुझे तकलीफ किन बातों से होती है और उन बातों से उसमें रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी मेरी है, या am I allowing the other person to do it to me, or do I enable that kind of behavior, do I myself act like that? तो इसके बारे में थोड़ी एनालिसिस की जाए तो शायद पता चल सकता है, and then one could take precautions against that. But like I said, it's easier said than done, and it's extremely difficult to alter a behavioral pattern, which is why I said कि childhood में जो हमारे pattern set होते हैं, to get good parents with good healthy relationship between them, कि जो abusive relationship ना हो, equality की relationship हो parents के बीच में, और वो हम देख के अगर जिए, तो that is one of the best influences one can get. But that is not possible for everyone. Of course, it is where we are born, to what kind of parents we are born to. हमारे हाथ में तो होता नहीं है. तो all we can do is deal with what cards we have been given. हमारी खुद की reactions ही malformed होती है. कई बार गलती हमसे ही चालू होती है, और उसके जो boomerang effects होते हैं, ripples होते हैं, वो हमें ही affect करते हैं. So that's all I can say. I don't think I can give a concrete answer to how to avoid it. There's no a silver bullet for that, I think, and you just have to understand yourself. But I'll give you one very example, if we a good example. Lot of times, simply approaching people with empathy also works. There was a anecdote which I read in this psychologist who had gone to an ashram somewhere up north, जो हरिद्वार वगैरह में कहीं आश्रम में गए थे, and he got to know the case study of a person. This guy used to have anger issues with women. Okay. And now this guy could have gone to a psychologist and taken years and years and decades of therapy and paid out lots of money. Instead of that, he went to the ashram. And वो आश्रम के जो महंत थे, गुरु थे, जो कोई थे, उन्होंने उसको बोला कि अच्छा, मुझे लेडीज के साथ रिलेट करने में प्रॉब्लम होती है, ठीक है, तू आश्रम में रहे कुछ दिन, और ये एक गाय है, इसका तू ख्याल रख बस. So now that was the female cow, of course, and this guy was told to take care of that cow. And he spent about a year or something like that taking care of that. And in taking care of that animal, he somehow started being connected to femininity better, in a more positive manner. तो कई बार आंसर डायरेक्टली रिलेशनशिप को टैकल करके ही नहीं आता. इट कैन कम फ्रॉम सिंपली ब्रिंगिंग आउट काइंडनेस इन सम अदर वे, एंड दैट कैन बी अ वे ऑफ रेक्टिफाइंग इट. बट अगेन लाइक आई सेड, आपको जो ऐसा गाइडेंस दे सके वो पर्सन मिलना भी मुश्किल होता है. So tough situation, but that is life, I guess.
Pankaj, one more question. Like, greatest philosophers, who've been on planet Earth for thousands of years. Some of the greatest religious figures, most of the major world religions, and everyone's always stressed on the fact that the greatest point of liberation and enlightenment is self-introspection. And there are quotes like from likes of Confucius that to conquer yourself is even bigger than conquering 1,000 armies. And every religion has it in some form or the other, whether that's Buddhism, Islam, Hinduism, that to conquer yourself.
Absolutely.
According to ये कहना तो आसान है, right? But according to you, I mean, millions, I think it's just a few who are able to do that. In Maslow's hierarchy, like reach that final penultimate truth.
Sure.
Could you shed some light on that? Like, what kind of a journey is that, and how many people do actually go there, or how many people are just faking it?
छोटे तौर पे तो सभी लोग करते हैं मेरे ख्याल से. I remember when I was a kid, सारे बच्चे all kids are afraid of the dark, right? So because the dark symbolizes something to us. उसमें क्या है हमको पता नहीं होता. So our mind projects things onto the dark. So I used to also be scared of the dark as a child, but for some reason, what I did is I trained myself not to be afraid of the dark by inventing my own method, which I later learned it was a very scientific way of doing it. I used to, stand near the light and I would switch the light off and see how long I could stand that. And I would also mentally think, क्या है, मैं देख लूं रूम को, फिर light off करूं और फिर देखूं मुझे डर लगता है क्या, because I have convinced myself there's nothing in the room. Okay, so there can be techniques like that. And in my opinion, one should not try to be, enlightened in some great sense or to conquer oneself in a great sense. I think it is sufficient to take small problems, छोटी चीजें भी हम कॉन्कर कर सके, अपने हैबिट्स कॉन्कर कर सके, तो आई थिंक दैट इज अ गुड इनफ थिंग. अदरवाइज इट बिकम्स लाइक अनदर आइडियल कि मुझे अपने आप को कॉन्कर करना है, उसके लिए ये करना है, वो करना है, जिससे आपको तकलीफ होती है, उसको आप पीसफुली कैसे हैंडल कर सके, दैट यू कैन फिगर आउट, आई गेस. एंड इफ यू पिक अ स्मॉल थिंग, then that can be tackled. But people want to do something, big, कि मुझे enlighten ही होना है or something, which I think is the wrong approach, a very idealistic kind of approach, and approach based on books and other people, following other people. Rather than that, आपको जिससे तकलीफ हो रही है, उसको आप tackle कर सकते हो छोटी तरह से. One person success is also good enough.
और कई बार हम कहते हैं ना, be yourself, but what if it's a person who's an asshole? So how should everyone be yourself?
Are you talking about yourself right now?
I did not say be yourself. I said accept yourself. Okay.
No. Thank you, Amana. Thank you for that. No. I said what I said is that how does one like be oneself, but there are so many flaws in oneself, and I mean you already said you have to at least acknowledge that and say, this is my dark side. But then again, how does one manage that thin line behind, not being not even saying, okay, let me even celebrate the worst of myself, and how does one fight that very tough battle in the mind?
Well, to give you an example of myself, lots of times I feel like making very sidey comments. Okay, I feel like making very sarcastic comments. Okay, but I think right as a child, I began to understand कि इससे दर्द हो सकता है किसी को. Okay, if somebody said something like that to me, I would get affected. So I think one of the best things is जो कहा है कि do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So ये अगर I think दिमाग में रखे तो आदमी थोड़ा कंट्रोल में रह सकता है. I do not believe in कि don't care about others, do what you want to do. ये थोड़ा गलत है, because we live in a society, we have to relate with others. उनको भी जीने का उतना ही हक है जितना आपको है, उनको भी लाइफ लर्न करने का उतना ही हक है जितना आपको है. एंड अगर आप कुछ कर रहे हो जिससे किसी को तकलीफ होती है, simply try and put yourself in other people's shoes, and then you start understanding कि भैया इससे दर्द होता है. And then when you put yourself into those shoes, you start understanding that ये गलत बात है. I think that's the way one can begin about it. And ऐसा नहीं है कि immediately transform हो जाएगा कोई फटाक से. But to understand, I think that all of us are the same. Okay, कि essential जो humanness होती है, that we are all made of the same kind of bricks and cement. We have the same kind of neural networks. And we are only gone through different circumstances. We are merely localized manifestations of the same consciousness, to put it in slightly esoteric words. तो आप और मैं कुछ अलग नहीं हूँ. If I had been born as Khalid, I would be Khalid, right? If Khalid had been born as Pankaj in my house to my parents, he would be me, right? So why would I want to hurt you, and why should you want to hurt me? So ये awareness होती है तो I think little bit change can begin. Again, easier said than done.
So
Pankaj, yes.
सो अभी तक जितनी हमने बातें की इससे बहुत कुछ मालूम पड़ता है कि हमारा चाइल्डहुड बहुत बड़ा और हमारे सर्कमस्टांसेस बहुत बड़े रीज़न है कि हम क्या चूज़ करते हैं। सो कैन वी से कि फ्रीडम ऑफ चॉइस इज ऑल्सो इल्यूजन इन दैट सेंस?
ये बहुत बड़ी फिलोसॉफिकल डिबेट है कि आदमी को फ्री विल है कि नहीं है। एंड इसमें कबीर का एक दोहा है, कबीरा किया कुछ न होता है, जो किया अनकिया होए, जो किया कुछ होता है, करता और कोई। अभी ये और कोई कौन है? इफ यू डोंट हैव टू बिलीव इन गॉड और डिविनिटी कि कोई और करता है, यू कैन सिंपली से कि इट हैपेंस बिकॉज लाइफ इज लाइक दैट आल्सो। सो the main point in this is, I'm sorry, I lost track. Could you repeat that and can we begin again? I think I
What
went
she
on.
what she said was that, is there something like free choice because you're a product of your
Ah,
childhood and those
right,
circumstances,
right.
environment are not under your control. And you
Yes,
spoke about Kabir saying that,
yes, yes.
ultimately, who
So
is it that
this is, अगर आप ये कबीर का दोहा is actually linked very well to modern consciousness sciences, जिसमें एक phenomena है which is called epiphenomenalism. इसका मतलब क्या है? They say that we only think that our consciousness is what is allowing us to do things. They say that actually things are happening and our consciousness is just flowing with it. ऐसा कहते हैं, and it's very difficult to realize that, I guess, but it is probably something like a dream in which you feel that it is me who's acting in the dream. आपको काफी बार लगता है कि मुझे X चीज करनी है ड्रीम में, whereas the triggering factor is something outside of you, कि आप नींद में हो, आपको टॉयलेट जाना है, एक्चुअली आपको टॉयलेट लगी, लेकिन नींद में that particular thing causes something else. Okay, so in a way it is something that is your consciousness is acting on you and you think that you are the doer, but you are not the doer. वो आपके through हो रहा है in some way. I don't know how to explain that. It's I'm probably being
I think you
very
gave the right example. Everyone goes through that dream once or twice in his life or many times.
yes.
Right. Pankaj, another question, because we're enjoying this so much, so I think we're going to today
That is
extend our time.
fun to talk.
Yeah, Pankaj, my question is that, you've spoken about all this and this is so much of wisdom, but can there be a middle ground between two different societies, between two different civilizations? And let me put it this way, one civilization which says live and let live. All right. You want to believe in something, you don't want to believe in something, you want to have a certain lifestyle, you don't want to have a certain lifestyle. Do what you want, just let the other person live and you also live.
Right.
Other civilizations like neither am I going to live, neither am I going to let you live. So how are you going to get a common ground
Now
between
you're
live
coming
and
to
let
the
live
now you're coming to the political part of the discussion, I think.
and the reality? So is there ever going to be a middle ground between such two opposing thoughts? Because clearly I don't see one.
Frankly, मेरी भी बुद्धि यहाँ कम पड़ती है. One does not know how things plays out over here, and I equate it to कि दो इंसानों के बीच में भी जो होता है वही societies के बीच में भी होता है, because society का भी collective consciousness होता है. A society also has a personality just like an individual. Yeah, if an individual is a person who can become angry or who remains peaceful, so similarly societies and collectives, human collectives also have the same tendencies. They can have a personality of being an angry society or it's a very peaceful society. We do say that Canadians are very relaxed as compared to Americans. We do say that people from this country or this particular culture are like this. So all of us have our societies. And effectively, what do you do when you come across a person who's absolutely refusing to relent and you are willing to be open-minded? That person refuses. So kya karoge? It's an eternal question. I think if I was able to give you an answer to that, situation would be very, very different. But I don't think I can give you an answer to that. It has to be something that can play out, because जो आपने अभी वर्ड यूज किया कि आप विजडम दे रहे हो, मैं विजडम नहीं दे रहा हूँ, मैं कहीं कहीं से जो बटोर के लाया हूँ वही आपको प्रेजेंट कर रहा हूँ. It does not mean that I have any sort of a wise answer to what you're asking. But this is a common problem, and it's a civilizational problem, and it's an individual problem. कि how do you deal? See, it's very easy in life ना, कि अगर कोई बंदे के साथ मेरी भिड़ंत हो गई तो मुझे अच्छा नहीं लगा तो मैं चले जाऊंगा कहीं और. But what do you do when you're forced to live with that person in the same environment, and that person is not going away, you're also not going away, and that person is refusing to listen to reason, and you think you're reasonable? What do you do? I don't think there's an answer that I can give you.
Even that's so nice that you're admitting that you don't have an answer to it. Both log would have just made it up.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the scenario जो पंकज ने बोला कि अगर ऐसे रहना पड़े किसी के साथ तो तुम क्या करोगे. I was just thinking कि अगर मैं उस situation में हूँ तो I might try to make things, you know, I might try to win the person, offer some favors. क्योंकि अगर आप किसी को इट्स वेरी बेसिक थिंग कि अगर आप किसी को फेवर करते हो तो देर आर चांसेस कि अगर उसके अंदर आपको लेके कुछ ऐसी भावनाएं भी हैं जो इट्स लाइक विपरीत भावनाएं जिसको बोल सकते हैं, तो वो भी थोड़ी शांत हो जाती हैं, क्योंकि उसमें मेरा अपना फायदा बहुत ज्यादा है. जितना मैं शांति बना के रखूंगी उतना मैं सुकून में रहूंगी. दैट्स हाउ आई थिंक ऑफ इट.
Fair enough. So societies have tried that. Societies have tried being peaceful. And I think, as I was once telling Khalid, that there have been so many peaceful societies on earth which no longer are existent.
Also, I think कि
came in
अगर
contact with societies which destroyed them.
right. Also, I think कि अगर मुझे उसके साथ अब रहना ही है, and I would be focusing कि उसका एटीट्यूड थोड़ा बहुत कैसे चेंज हो जाए और मैं भी थोड़ा उसको एडजस्ट करूं, ताकि एक ऐसे कॉमन पॉइंट पे हम लोग कहीं ना कहीं तो जुड़ सके, सो वी कैन लिव पीसफुली. दैट वुड बी माई मेन वे ऑफ लिविंग टुगेदर इंस्टेड ऑफ फाइटिंग. क्योंकि पता है कि फाइट में बहुत ज्यादा एनर्जी जाता है, वो एनर्जी मैं अपने ऊपर खर्च करूंगी भाई फॉर पॉजिटिव थिंग्स. सो that's my personal opinion. It can
Absolutely.
vary.
And it's a very valid opinion, and that is what people have tried. But when someone says, "Ya to jhuko or I will kill you," and when you,
there is
bow
also
down, the other person thinks कि you're actually bowing down because I'm more powerful.
So there is also this thing कि saving energy, मतलब conflict में खर्च करने से it is very very wise thing to do, but also you have to be careful कि वो conflict कहाँ तक avoid किया जा सकता है. If that is the thing कि वो conflict avoid होगा ही नहीं and there is only one way to win over the war, then तो फिर full mode, there is no other way. Because I think this is the, we all are selfish, so अपने आप को preserve करना is the first thing one can think of,
I guess. Yes.
So इसी में मुझे लगता है कि balance है, but my first will be कि let's live peacefully, let's try. अगर कुछ ज़्यादा भी करना पड़े, it's unfair even to me, a little bit, ठीक है, इसे भी बर्दाश्त कर लिया जाए, but let's be peaceful. So
well,
peace.
Yes, that's a familiar approach. Yes.
हाँ खालिद, कुछ कहना है?
Peace partner.
राइट. एंड एक्चुअली होता ये है ना, जैसे मेरे सिबलिंग्स है काफी, ठीक है, मेरे 4 बहनें हैं, तो उनके साथ रह रह करके आप सीख भी जाते हो प्रैक्टिकली. नॉट दैट कि मेरे जान की प्यासी हैं, बट देयर कम्स टाइम जब होता है कंफ्लिक्ट, तो होता ही होता है, सो यू लर्न
what to do. Life is like that only.
ठीक है. इसी के साथ आज का हमारा एपिसोड खत्म होता है. थैंक यू फॉर वॉचिंग, और कोई भी सजेशन हो तो प्लीज कमेंट बॉक्स में लिखिए. लाइक और सब्सक्राइब और शेयर करना मत भूलिए. हम पैट्रियन पे भी हैं और आप हमारी यूट्यूब को ज्वाइन भी कर सकते हैं. धन्यवाद.
Thank you so much.
Thank you Pankaj. Thank you everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you Khalid. Thank you.